Weeks before Nancy Guthrie vanished, the FBI was already collecting evidence. Not from inside her home. Not from her phone. From the ground outside her property. Thumbnail images. Captured by surveillance cameras positioned around her Catalina Foothills neighborhood. Footage that recorded landscapers trimming hedges, family members coming and going, everyday movement in an everyday neighborhood. ABC News confirmed it. CBS confirmed it. The footage showed nothing suspicious. But here's the thing that keeps investigators, and people like us, up at night. The cameras showed who was there. What nobody's asking loudly enough is, who wasn't? Because surveillance footage can only tell you what it sees. It cannot tell you what it missed. It cannot tell you about the person who knew exactly where each camera was pointed. The person who knew the blind spots. The angles. The gaps. And on the night of January 31st, 2020, those gaps mattered more than anything that was captured. This is the case of Nancy Guthrie. And today, on the Case Code, we're going beyond the cameras. We're asking the question that formal investigations may have overlooked. Not who was seeing, but who was watching. Let's establish the facts first. Nancy Guthrie. A woman described by her family as warm, active, deeply connected to her community. She lived in the Catalina Foothills, a wealthy, carefully maintained neighborhood on the outskirts of Tucson, Arizona, and Pima County. This is not a neighborhood of unlocked doors and strangers wandering in. This is private. Manicured. The kind of place where people know each other's cars but not necessarily each other's names. On the evening of January 31st, 2025, at 9:48 p.m., Nancy was dropped off at her home by her son-in-law, Tommaso Chione. That is the last confirmed sighting of her. By the following morning, February 1st, when she missed her virtual church service, something her family says she never did without reason, the alarm was raised. She was reported missing. No signs of a struggle. No forced entry that we know of. No immediate explanation. And that silence, that clean, quiet disappearance from a monitored, upscale neighborhood, is exactly what makes this case so disturbing. Now, when we talk about the Catalina Foothills, we need to understand the ecosystem of this kind of neighborhood. Because it's not just residents who move through these streets every day. It is an entire invisible workforce. Landscapers. Pool maintenance crews. House cleaners. Delivery drivers. Construction workers. These are the people who keep wealthy neighborhoods functioning. They move through gates, around driveways, past security cameras, and most residents barely register them. They become part of the background. Part of the routine. And that invisibility, that assumed harmlessness, creates something investigators call ambient surveillance. These workers are not just doing jobs. Over weeks and months, they accumulate knowledge. They learn when a driveway is empty. They learn which camera covers which angle. They learn what time the dogs are walked, when lights go off, when a household becomes quiet. Most of the time, this knowledge means absolutely nothing. But in a case like Nancy Guthrie's, it means everything. Now let's talk about what happened to the cameras on the night she disappeared. Because this is where the case takes a turn that should unsettle every single person watching this. The surveillance cameras in and around Nancy's neighborhood worked perfectly for weeks before January 31st. The FBI was able to recover footage, those thumbnail images we mentioned, capturing regular neighborhood activity without any issues. After the disappearance, the cameras continued functioning. Everything was normal. Except for that one night. The night Nancy Guthrie vanished, the cameras recorded nothing. No footage. No data. A complete blackout during the most critical window of this entire investigation. Now, equipment malfunctions happen. Power outages happen. But here is the detail that transforms this from a coincidence into a calculated act. Neighbors reported internet outages that same night. Ring cameras across the area, not just at Nancy's property, but nearby, also failed. Multiple systems, and multiple locations, going dark at the same moment. The word investigators and security experts have floated in connection with this pattern is Wi-Fi jammer. A Wi-Fi jammer is a device that disrupts wireless signals within a certain radius. They are illegal for civilian use in the United States. But they exist. They are obtainable. And when deployed correctly, they can knock out an entire neighborhood's smart security infrastructure without leaving a visible trace. Think about what that requires. It is not an impulsive act. You don't walk into a neighborhood with a jammer on a whim. You need to know which systems are wireless. You need to know the range required. You need to know when to activate it and for how long. This was not random. This was rehearsed. And if someone rehearsed this, if someone spent time understanding this neighborhood's security infrastructure, then the question we have to ask is, when? When did they learn it? And more importantly, how did they move through this neighborhood unnoticed while they were learning it? This is the part of the story that stopped us cold when we came across it. A gardener, a man who worked regularly in the Catalina Foothills neighborhood, came forward. Not to police. Not to the FBI. He gave his account to JLR Investigates and The Mirror. And what he said was not about what he saw on January 31st. What he said was about what never happened. 6 weeks after Nancy Guthrie disappeared, 6 weeks into a high-profile federal missing persons investigation, nobody had ever contacted him. Not the FBI. Not local law enforcement. Not a single investigator had knocked on his door, called his number, or asked him a single question. A man who was a regular presence in that neighborhood. Who knew those streets? Who had watched the routines of that community play out in front of him for months, possibly years. A man who could have noticed a new face. An unfamiliar truck. Someone paying a little too much attention to a particular house. And he was never asked. Now, we want to be careful here. We are not accusing investigators of negligence. Federal investigations are complex. They move in directions the public doesn't see. But the gardener's account raises a question that is not conspiracy theory, it is basic investigative logic. If he was overlooked, who else was? Because the Catalina Foothills is not a quiet, sleepy street. It is an active, constantly evolving construction zone. New builds. Renovations. Expansions. At any given time, there are work crews moving through that area who have entirely legitimate reasons to be there. Trucks parked on the street for hours. Workers on ladders with direct sight lines into properties. People whose presence raises no flags, prompts no questions, and registers in no database. This is what we call the informal labor network. A significant portion of construction and landscaping in American neighborhoods operates through day laborers, workers hired informally, sometimes through corner pickups or casual referrals. With no formal employment record, no company registration, no paper trail. These are not criminals. These are working people. But from an investigative standpoint, they are nearly impossible to trace after the fact. And that invisibility, that structural gap in accountability, is exactly the kind of environment a calculated predator can exploit. Think about it from the perspective of someone conducting pre-operational surveillance. You want to study a target's neighborhood without drawing attention. You want to learn camera positions, routines, and blind spots. What is your best cover? You hire on with a landscaping crew. You show up as part of a construction team. You are wearing work clothes, carrying tools, moving with purpose. You belong there. Nobody looks twice. You could spend weeks in that neighborhood and leave no trace that any investigation would ever find, unless someone specifically went looking for you. The gardener's interview isn't just a detail. It is a window into a potential gap in this investigation that could be the difference between finding Nancy Guthrie and never knowing what happened to her. Let's look at this from two angles. Because there are two reasonable explanations for why the service worker network may not have been fully canvassed. Scenario A. The FBI already has a strong lead. Federal investigations operate on a need-to-know basis. If the FBI has developed a credible suspect from digital evidence, financial records, or a person in Nancy's inner circle, they may be deliberately narrowing their focus. Canvassing every contractor in a 3-mile radius could compromise a sensitive operation, alert a target, or simply be a resource allocation decision. In this scenario, the investigative blind spot is intentional and not actually a blind spot at all. Scenario B, there is a genuine gap. High-profile missing persons cases almost always begin with the inner circle. Family, friends, known associates. This is statistically correct. Most victims know their perpetrators. But this statistical logic can create tunnel vision. And when you add the informal labor network into the equation, workers with no contracts, no company records, no digital footprint, you have a population that is genuinely difficult to investigate and easy to deprioritize. And then there's the deeper question underneath both scenarios. Did the perpetrator know Nancy, or did they know her environment? Because those are two very different profiles. Someone who knew Nancy personally would appear in her phone records, her social media, her circle. Investigators would find them relatively quickly. But someone who knew her environment, her routines, her neighborhood, her security setup, but had no personal connection to her, that person is almost invisible to a conventional investigation. The Wi-Fi jammer, the camera knowledge, the precise timing. These details suggest someone who understood the system around Nancy, not necessarily Nancy herself. And that someone may have been standing in her neighborhood for weeks, in plain sight, wearing work boots and carrying a shovel, while the world looked right past them. Here's what we know for certain. Nancy Guthrie has been missing since January 31st, 2025. The FBI has publicly stated they are seeking a potential subject, not yet a named suspect, but someone they believe has information or involvement connected to her disappearance. That distinction matters. It tells us the investigation is active and moving, but has not yet reached an arrest. What we have laid out today is not accusation. It is observation. It is the kind of analysis that comes from looking at the edges of a case, not just the center. High-profile investigations always focus inward. The family, the close associates, the last known contacts. And that focus is correct and necessary. But the edges matter too. The people who existed in the background of Nancy's life without ever being in her life. The workers who knew her street better than she did. The presence that required no invitation because it was already expected. Cases are often broken not by what investigators find at the center, but by what they find at the margins. If you live in or near the Catalina Foothills area, if you worked in that neighborhood in January 2025, if you saw something that felt slightly off, a face you didn't recognize, a truck parked too long, a moment that didn't quite fit, please do not assume someone else already reported it. Make the call yourself. The reward for information leading to Nancy Guthrie's safe return stands at $1.2 million, contributed by her family, the FBI, and anonymous donors. That is not a small number. That is a number that says someone, somewhere, wants answers badly enough to make it worth your time to speak up. Contact the FBI directly at 1-800-CALL-FBI. And to everyone watching, if this case matters to you, the most powerful thing you can do right now is share this video. Because the gardener came forward to a journalist, not to law enforcement. He came forward because someone was asking the right questions. That is what this channel exists to do. Ask the questions. Stay on the case. This is the case code. We'll be back when there's more to uncover. Stay with us.